started. I want to welcome everybody to the NADEC Grassroots Advocacy webinar. This is a very special webinar with very special speakers of who I will introduce here in a minute. But this is the first in a series of webinars regarding DEC-specific topics. These are things that we create at the NADEC to help local DECs get engaged, get out there, whether it's educated related items, whether it's just the typical DEC structure, help with your treasury and forming your DEC or recruiting DEC members, or even, as this webinar is, advocacy. A lot of things that DECs do. We'll be creating new webinars and you'll see a lot of them. And I'll mention another one that's going to be more of a trade related topic here in a minute. But we would appreciate your feedback, not only on this webinar, but if you have any suggestions for DEC related webinars or trade related topics, please don't hesitate to send us an email and just let us know what your feelings are on webinars that you'd like to see. And education and advocacy they're pivotal roles that DEC members are playing in exporting. And advocacy and reaching out to stakeholders are often the most difficult things for DEC members because they're not used to speaking to legislative stakeholders. You're not used to speaking to people in the House of Representatives or senators or their staff members. And so a lot of DEC members tend to hesitate and shy away from these opportunities. But it's very important for DEC members to meet with these people and to actually have relationships, conversations with them, and to advocate for trade-related items, lowering trade barriers, different topics that will help not only you and your business, but other businesses and other DEC members as well. And today's webinar really will help DEC members reaching out to their prospective representatives. We're going to show you some tips and tricks. The two speakers that we have are absolutely experienced to the hilt with this, and they're going to share their tips and tricks and some documentation that will all be sent out. So please don't try to write down, trying to read the small print, write everything down. Please don't try to do that. We will send this all out to everybody. It will be available on the website. We will make sure you get it. And before I introduce the speakers, one other thing that I promised I would do, hot off the press, a NADEC webinar, April 19th at 4 p.m. Eastern time, will be on Russia and Belarus export controls and sanctions, compliance with new rules from an enforcement perspective. So this will be a brand new webinar just announced on this webinar. Hasn't been announced yet. You guys are the first ones to hear it. So congratulations, you will get a leg up in registration for that one. But let me introduce our speakers, and I'm kind of go backwards here. I'm going to introduce John Saylor first. John Saylor, who lives and works in Washington, D.C., has spent over 40 years working on Capitol Hill on various issues from maritime and transportation legislation to foreign government programs. Restoration of the most favored nation status for Yugoslavia was one of his great accomplishments. John really is, he's very, I would say, humble, because John was also a very key component of getting trade promotion authority passed. And I don't know a lot of people if they know that or not, but John was a part of that when the Obama administration was there, and actually received a phone call from the president thanking him personally for that. So John did not give that to me, but I'm going to share that with you anyway. But he also was involved in multiple trade issues, including 10 free trade agreements. And he has over many years developed personal relationships on the Hill and has an excellent grasp on the inner workings of Congress. And I can tell you that John is a great point person because he's in that Virginia, DC area. We tend to reach out to him and say, hey, can you help us with this or help us with that for some of our DEC members that are maybe a little bit too far away from DC to reach those members. So that's our first speaker, John Saylor. So great person and resource to have there. And then I'm going to talk about our next speaker here, Richard Grana, what I call Rick Grana, president of Impex, providing export management company services to conveyor accessory manufacturers. So yes, he is a manufacturer. Mr. Rick Grana, the manufacturer, as I call him. He has over 35 years experience in sales, domestic and international, with marketing, manufacturing, materials management, international purchasing, distribution, and plant startup with Hublin, I hope I said that right, Incorporated, Black Velvet Canadian Whiskey, some of you may know that name, and Gen X Corporation, which is genetic engineering. But Impex in 1991 has maintained an international sales force for Arch Environmental Equipment, Distributor agents were developed by using his USIAC, his World Trade Center in Kentucky, STEP grant resources, such as international partner searches, gold keys, and other products that are available. Currently, Impex has agents distributors in 19 countries and clients in 30 plus countries. Rick is a current member of the Kentucky District Export Council. He became vice chair in 2006. He has just been elected as Kentucky DEC chair. So congratulations to you, Rick, for that, being Kentucky DEC chair. He's been associate member of the NADEC from 2012 through 2020. He's been the past co-chair of the Trade Policy Committee of the National Association of District Export Councils. And in 2020, he was appointed to the NADEC's newly founded advisory board. And Rick has also not been just entangled with DECs and World Trade Centers. He's been a member of the ITAC 11 or 9, whichever number you want to go through here, depending on when you were on ITACs, since 2008. And he's attended various EU-US workshops for SME in Europe and US for framework of the Transatlantic Economic Council. And he's part of that US delegation there. And then also, Rick is also graduated at the University of Kentucky and a US Army veteran. And I really want to thank both of our speakers for being there. A couple of housekeeping items before I turn it over to Rick and John is if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. Again, you will all receive a copy of this presentation, so do not worry if you don't get all the notes. We'll get it out to you. It's also being recorded, so it'll be available as a recording as well. But please put your questions in the Q&A, and we will read out the questions. And I'm going to introduce real quick. He'll come in a little bit later, but the NADEC chair, Sean Levison, will be also in the Q&A helping me moderate this. So I welcome everybody to this webinar, and Rick and John, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, what happened here? All right, we've got our page 2, and I'm glad that Sean has already given you all some information about why and some of the reasons that we'd like to go up to the Hill from time to time. And this specific instance on this year is that the advisory board has done a wonderful job of making a paper that you can take with you. It was a multiple paper devised by 2 or 3 of some of our advisory board members. They've whittled it down to a 1-page called Revitalizing the Commercial Service. You all may be aware that we need to have more boots on the ground. And when you're trying to do exporting, so some of you are new to exporting, or some of you are trying to export or expand your markets. But, and then you need some people to do some research. But besides the people at the USIACs in the United States, we need to have more boots on the ground overseas in the embassies to help. And so this is a very, very big situation. They're understaffed, and the people like us that are trying to do our exporting and gain, you know, if you make a product and you can't sell it, it doesn't make any difference how well you make it. So you need to have sales, and you need to have distributors or agents or some other way, you know, if you're in franchising or whatever method that you use to do your marketing. But you need assistance. And if you have to wait on people that are overseas in the embassies to get your gold key or your IPS or any of these other type of products that the USIACs provide to you, then you're losing time and money. So this is very, very important. We need to get some more funds for the commercial service. This paper explains in detail about what that's about. The other reason that you may want to go up to the Hill is to also talk about some of your personal situations. It's really good if you talk about your company, what you do, some of the problems that you have to your congressmen or your senators. So please be aware to do that. We're going to go on to the next slide here. So this is what this page number 2 has. Then when you're going up there, you want to be sure and talk about the district export. Some of them, you know, this is a very flexible document. In other words, you may not need all these pages, but if you do, you've got it. So I decided to put number 3, page 3 in here about the district export councils, so that you'll have that with you and you can help glean some information off of that when you're discussing this, either on the phone or with the members in person. So these items here are very, very important so that they know about where you're coming from and who you represent. The next thing is about the contacts and how to do that. So that's very, very important. We have used, where I've highlighted it red, about www.congress.org. Probably many of you have not used that, but this is a small little, I guess, picture of some of the different pages that you will encounter when you hit congress.org and you put your zip code in there, and then you keep going through. And if you click on one of these people down here at the bottom that I'm got my scroll or my pointer, it's very interesting because you'll see 4 different things about that person: the contact information, personal information about where they went to church or where they went to school or their degree, their political, and then their staff. I would say the most important for you on this particular exercise is your staff. You need to know who to see and who the scheduler is and people like that. So as you could see up here, if we want to do a letter or whatever to the legislative director, or they have a scheduler in there. So it doesn't hurt to try to hit all 3 of these people.
Hey, Rick, I apologize. If we were to go back to that earlier page where it mentioned, it was just an overview of the district export councils. And John, I don't know if you're going to touch on this later, but a lot of our legislative representatives, certainly staffers, don't even know what the decks are.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sean. We're going to touch on that later.
Okay, I apologize.
What I'm doing is Rick needs to go through this, and then we're going to come back.
Yeah.
And then we're going to rehash it of what's important and what they're looking
Okay.
at in the Hill. So
Yeah.
I would suggest that Rick, go ahead and finish what you're doing, but Sean, you're on the right page. You're on the right track.
Exactly, right. Like I said, it's a very flexible type of document, and you could throw away pages that you don't need. You know, this is for just a shotgun approach to all of our members. Some are very new, some are very experienced. Some have already done this many times. So we're just trying to help everybody. And it's a good refresher course for those that do it. Here's another page. This is mostly about just some tips, you might say, or as Johnson said, some tricks. I don't think it's a trick, but anyway, it's a tip. But if you have to know how to address it. So if you don't know, you could look at this and see about how to do the names and things like that. For the House is different. And then the Senate, you know, you have the first name, and it's a underscore between the first name and the last name. And that's very important. Believe me, I've had some problems with that a long time ago. And so you finally have to say, wait a minute. The last thing about there, and then about a phone call to the scheduler, and all these are very, very good equity type of etiquette type of things to do. I would say at the very bottom, and I put that in red, is that due to the pandemic and the change due to security, some of your members may not want to meet on the Hill. John has got some really good statements to talk about that later on. But if they don't want to meet you at their office or in the building, then they may want to meet you outside or somewhere else. And John can explain that further. One other thing, though, is here's an appointment example. You may run into this, some type of, depends on how well you know your member or the staff. If you don't know them at all, you'll probably run into this. Even though I did know them, you still have some type of policy that you have to abide by. So you could see this. This is just an example that I took a snapshot of back in 2017. And this is about Senator McConnell and the scheduler, Emily Loudon. In fact, she is still there, but she is coming to Kentucky actually in a month. So we'll have somebody new. You can see the text at the bottom, and there's the list of the individuals that wanted to attend with us. You can also use some of the text that I have in here, or the format. This is a time saver for you. This is all for your information, and you could copy, do whatever you want with it. So here's some of the topics we had back then. If you'll notice, support of the budget negotiations, that's a constant, seems to be a constant problem. We never have enough funds to really do an adequate job for the commercial service. And we really do need to get this fixed compared to what we had at least even 5 to 8 years ago. This is another little part of the information from some of the people there. If you're the principal contact for that, there's what we put down back then. And then Dr. Brown, who was our chair of the NADEC back then, is now the advisory board chair. And then Peggy Pauley, which is a great USAC director for Kentucky. If you notice at the very top in red, I wanted you to be sure to know that the USAC directors are not allowed to talk about policy, things like that. But she is a support person for informational meeting if you have some kind of a problem or something like that, and she could add to that. So then you've got 2 other people that attended. I deleted the others, it didn't matter. This is just for an example. So you put down that, these are fairly explanatory, and then you have your 1 sentence for your main products and HS code. All right, we're getting close to the end now. So then this is, once you do that, we'd like to follow up and see how well things are going, or if anybody has contacted their members for the DEC and for the NADEC and for our particular problems that we're trying to solve. So if you would fill out this form, the link is active at the top, and it's also on the webpage. And then you could fill that out, and that will immediately send this information to our leadership of the NADEC. Then we just have a USAC map that anybody could take a look at, see the different regions. They're all listed down there in the bottom there where it says the ODO networks, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, things like that. So that's basically it. It's not very long. We're trying to keep things very, very simple. And I will go back up through the top, and then we can go and discuss whatever else that we can. And John can go ahead and fill in some of the blanks, John. Thank you, John, for helping us.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Let's go ahead and assume that most people on this call have never actually reached out to their member of Congress, whether in the House or the Senate. There are some on this call, I'm sure, who've done this, and I would consider them old pros, and everybody has their way of doing it. I can tell you that if you haven't done it, and it's the first time, maybe a little nervous. I remember the very first time that I went up on the Hill to meet with a member of Congress, and that was when I was on the National Maritime Council. And after a while, you get comfortable with it. And I've had many years, as I said, of doing this. But basically, how do you start? And the suggestion that we've always had for people that are, if you're not here in Washington, of course, I'm with the Virginia DC DEC. And as a former chairman, I've been doing this for many years and 20 some odd years on the DEC. So representing a lot of things in the DEC, but I've also had experience before I came on the DEC. So for those who are not here in the DC area, the first thing you would do, I mean, it's always difficult to reach out to a member in their office here in Washington. You're not sure if you're going to be heard from or if they're going to recognize that. Rick gave you some good examples of how you approach them. But the first call I would make would be the district office in your state. Start develop that relationship with the district office and the people who run that office. They are looking for input from the members' constituents. So whether it's a House member or it's a member of the Senate, you just got to put this in the back of your mind as well. Every one of these people are running for election. They all want your vote. And of course, they'd like to have your money too, but that's another story. We're not going there, but they all want your vote. So they're going to try to be cooperative. Now we're in an election year right now. So as Rick had mentioned in there, as you go through this document, you'll have opportunities with your deck or your individuals or even hosting a member of Congress at your facilities. And because it is an election year, trust me, they will go. They will find a way to talk to as many constituents as they possibly can. But if you start working with the district office and go from there, the district office can put you in direct contact with the member's office here in Washington, and you can start the dialogue. Make sure that you get everybody's names, make sure you get everybody's phone numbers and their direct phone numbers, because if you call the office, they got lots of numbers. So it's important that you do that. It's also important that you remember that these members and their staff, particularly their staff, are mostly young and they're kind of inexperienced. So those of you, all of us out there who have a lot of experience in international, I would say, and Rick and you and Sean and Jonathan could agree on this, the bulk of these staffers have pretty much zero experience when it comes to international business and how it's done and what you have to do. So what we've always done the deck, and one of our things that we've done for the members and particularly the staff as to educate them on what we do and why international exports and trade is so important to us. I could tell you from my personal experience on the Hill with meeting with members who have no idea. I'm not talking about their staff. I'm talking about the actual members themselves are very limited. A lot of them are limited in their knowledge. So again, you have to educate them and bring them up to speed. But just remember, and I've said this many times in many years, we've had these conversations. Don't be afraid of these members of Congress. They are an elected official, but you got to remember, especially in the House, every 2 years, they're doing a new job application, and they actually report to you. So you got to get that mindset off and don't go in there and think they're holier than thou, because they're not. I can say this because as Jonathan mentioned and lead up to this, or excuse me, yes, as Jonathan mentioned, that I have a lot of personal experiences and a lot of members of Congress are actually personal friends, but this has come over years. And so you get a feeling for what they are, and they're just, believe it or not, a lot of them are just average people. And they're good. And the same thing with their staffers. And I would suggest that if you have something that you want to get, you develop that relationship with that staffer. If you do come to Washington, the chances are you probably won't get to meet with a member, but then again, you might. Depends on what the subject is and what you're up here for. So it's a lot of information here. Rick, I'm going to turn it over to you to add a few more comments before I go on.
Well, I just think that when we were talking about the staffers, when we go to congress.org, and I told you about those 4 different columns there, and you go to the staff, what I would do is when you do call in there, go over all of this information. Number 1, have they moved? It may say that they're in the Leavenworth or the Rayburn building or whatever, and they may have moved or Longworth is what I meant to say. And you because they all do, they move, the more seniority they get, they move to a different office when they can. So that's the number 1 thing, because these things are not always up to date. I can tell you right now, I know our congressman, there's 2 or 3 people, because I know them, that they retired. So those are open. But, and then you talk to the person that answered the phone, see if they could help you go through some of the names to get them, and then who's the scheduler and things like that. But this is a good, at least this is a start document. You get some of those numbers, you go to that web page, you get those phone numbers, and then you can verify some of that. And it won't take you as long as if you didn't have any kind of guidance.
Yeah, I'd like to also make a comment too about, I found this interesting in some of my visits up there, meeting with the members, not just the staffers. You know, we were talking about advocating for more positions with the commercial service overseas. All right, this is a big area, and I think a lot of you, we've actually had this with some of our conversations in the past in the meetings, how we think it's so important when anybody is traveling outside the country. If you have the time, please go into the embassy and see the commercial service officer that's there, because it's so important that you develop that relationship with them in there. They know you're there. A lot of times it will lead to a meeting with the ambassador. I've had that happen many, many, many times where I've gone in there, met with the ambassador or the deputy, the DCM, the charge, to talk about that. But what I've always found interesting, some of the members back here, they would ask the question, well, why do we need a commercial service office or commercial office in XYZ country? Why can't you just go to the State Department? Let the State Department handle that because it's the embassy. And I love that question, because if you've ever had to deal with the State Department or the economic officers, when there is no commercial service officer or no commercial staff, and it's all left up to the State Department, the service you get is like night and day. And it is very difficult. And that's an explanation from personal experience that you can explain to that member of Congress. A lot of them just don't understand. And we always joked in the past that, you know, there's a lot of members of Congress that don't even have a passport. You know, that was always, we always found that enjoyable when they want to get into it. So it's something that, it's, again, as I went back to, I mentioned earlier, is on an education process that you have to go through. I think that if you do get the opportunity and you do come to Washington and you do get your meeting set up, you know, just remember that when you do come in, and if you're fortunate enough to meet with a member themselves, that you have a certain limited time period. And behind you could be other people before you got there. So there's a lot flowing through. You've got to leave them with something that they're going to remember, something they're going to help with. And one of the things that the DEC has always done over the years is making sure, particularly with the staff, that we are here to help you. We are here to provide information to you. If you're looking for something on a particular subject on international, don't hesitate to contact us and we will get that information for you. They look at that as really, really helpful because they don't know where to turn, you know, and if they're, you know, if they can come to you, that's extremely important. I think that one other thing that we talked about, you know, is, again, if you're out in the districts and meeting with the members there, when you go in to see a member on the Hill or talking to their staff and you're in the DEC, it's always good to be loaded with information. So you could talk about what trade means to that member's district. How many companies are in his or her district or even in the state that are involved in international trade? What's the dollar amount that affects the state? This tax revenue that comes off of those companies are because of their export and their trade services. And you know, the number of people who are directly tied to trade in that state. I always like to quote here in the state of Virginia that we have the Virginia Port Authority. And with the ports down there, that's all trade related. And when you could say the port says that 10% of all the revenues generated in the state is coming through the port, you know, on the tax relief, that's a huge number. And they don't realize it. I can tell you that our members there in Congress in the state of Virginia know that because we hammer it home all the time. But if you're in your state, if you don't have a port, that doesn't matter. But if you're in the Midwest, if you've got agriculture exports, you need to tout those numbers. They need to know what those numbers are. They need to know how many people are affected by trade and how that member's help could basically support and continue with those members, with those companies and their activities as they trade worldwide. Rick?
No, I think you're absolutely right on that. I've had some problems with, we've had well, we're with the Kentucky delegation, of course, and well, I'm trying to be very delicate. Sometimes the knowledge hasn't really gotten out to certain people, but we're trying, or they're not interested. But you do have to, it's a fight that you have to do with certain type of members. And it's just something that needs to be done all the time. But we do have a great amount of information about what's being exported out of Kentucky. Our USAC office has really done a great job of helping us list. Actually, they've done all the work, which they usually do, and listed a lot of the different types of exports that are coming from Kentucky. You'd be surprised at the aeronautics type of items. And then of course, our alcoholic beverages are doing fairly well at the present. So, but there's others. There's mine, which is very, very, very small, but we try to help. But anyway, John is exactly right. We're very lucky with some of our other people, other members, that they are very well up to date about that. But that's because, like John said, that we've already been doing this. But like I said, this is a flexible type of conversation. There's 50 states, and we need to try to see some of the ones that don't have this type of information or these type of members, and if they need to go ahead and do the best they can with the information that they have. And maybe if they don't have it, they could, ask for it through the UCACs.
Yeah, we had a conversation amongst ourselves yesterday. I mean, as a reminder, because you're going to run into members, whether it's your member or somebody else within your state delegation, that are basically trade protectionists. They don't like trade at all. And I always love that when I get into that conversation with a member, and I've had it a couple of times where they've said that, no, we don't, my constituents, they don't really like trade. I went through this whole thing when we were trying to get Exim Bank reauthorized. Oh my God, you would, some of the questions, some of the statements were, I couldn't believe it was actually coming out of their mouths. So I would ask the question of why? I mean, I said, Congressman, or Congresswoman, or Senator, let me ask you a question. I said, do you have a Walmart in your district? And they go, yeah, of course they do. I said, and I bet your constituents just love going to Walmart because the prices are so cheap. But yeah, absolutely. And I said, well, you realize like 85% of everything that's sold in Walmart is imported. And that's all related to trade. Let's take bananas, for example. If bananas are not grown in the United States. They're just not here. We got trade agreements with these countries, whether it's Colombia or Central America or Ecuador. We have trade agreements with these countries that our exports going out, the imports coming in, but it's all trade related. A lot of them never thought about that. And again, I go back, it's an education process. They just don't think about it. I have friends of mine here in Washington. They're not involved in this, but I always joke with them. If you're going to the supermarket, have you ever bothered to take a look at labels and see where stuff comes from? No, they just think it shows up. So it's just, people just don't think about it. And that's up to us to sort of educate them.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, John, just have some input from Andy Corellis, who shares or mentions that we should also share good news, what's out there as far as trade and, getting a consistent meeting, speaking with those reps. But yeah, again, the great things trade can do for your constituents as well.
Yeah, a shout out to Andy because his group does a really good job, on that. But that's absolutely true. There is good work that's being done. You just can't let it slide. You just can't. And I mean, the deck has been good in the past, and we've worked with other organizations. We did it on trade agreements, and going around and meeting with as many people as we possibly can. But you have to keep the message out in front of them. And the old saying of the wheel that squeaks the loudest gets the most oil. And we're finding out that within, it's good because I'm, being here in Washington, it's easy for me. And I socialize with members with members, I socialize with their staff, like I said, that's a different type of environment that you would have if you're outside, because you don't have that luxury that I do. But for those who are outside, it's not easy. I mean, you have to work at it. You have to do this. You have to get that message out. And I'd also suggest that working with your state promotion authorities. We have here in the state of Virginia, the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. It's a state agency which we're doing in conjunction with the Commerce Department on trade promotion. We do it all the time. I've got meetings tomorrow on the same thing with the state. I suggest you and a lot of these states we've seen in the past. I know the guys in Alabama. Alabama is really active in that. There are other states that are very active in that. You need to join forces with them as well. Everybody that's coming in, it helps the cause.
I wanted to make sure, and I think, Sean, you may be covering this later on, but there's some links that Sean's going to send you, and this has to do with the revitalizing the commercial service type of program that we're trying to launch. And there's a very, very nice list of the Senate and the House members of the different committees that have an interest or can actually help with this type of funding. And this needs to be really printed out. It's 2 or 3 pages for the House and a couple for the Senate, but you'd be surprised at the membership that's on this list. And if you are very lucky that you've got some of these type of either House members or senators on there, then you've really struck gold, because these are the people that we need to get. And by the way, if you don't have it and your member is also, in your district, of course, your district, they may know somebody else that can assist you with this. So you need to network on this type of thing, and not just on this particular issue, about your own issues. If you need some HR numbers change, or for rules of origin, or any of these barriers to trade, things like that. These are the type of things that you need to also, besides telling us about, you need to mention that to your members so that they know if they hear about something like that, they'll say, yes, I do remember something about that. But it's like John said, they need to be reelected, and they should be working for you, and they should be listening to your problems and how you can give them solutions to solve those problems, or at least type of recommendations.
You would be surprised of how many members are actually looking for allies, companies in their district or in their state. When you come in and you want to talk to them, or you write them about something you're working on, say, oh my God, it's something we've been looking for a company that could help us to direct where we want to gather more information. I've had that happen a number of times, and surprising in places that came out of I least expected it. So that's something else to bear in mind, because they could also find you a very useful. I mean, you don't want to be a tool of them. I mean, nobody wants to do that, but just remember your position and how they want. You can help them as much as they can help you.
Right.
And I just want to interject real quick an example of that for you DEC members that aren't used to how the DECs kind of can interact with members of Congress. Most of you remember the huge challenge we had of getting XM rechartered. I mean, that was a bipartisan, struggle to get that passed. And what the North Carolina District Export Council did was actually find a small business, and the North Carolina DEC got a video together in support of rechartering XM that then the legislators in North Carolina were able to use to say, well, look at this small business in rural Western North Carolina. They use XM. That's why we want to support XM. We're not supporting, let's say, Boeing or some of the other negative companies that they were using. They were able to point to a small business DEC success story and use that as actually, I won't say cover, but it was justification for their support of rechartering XM. And I wanted to give that example, but I also wanted to bring up to John and to Rick, what a lot of DECs aren't is intentional in their advocacy. If you guys could touch on that. And the second thing is, how important it is to get the local staff members or the the legislatures themselves to maybe your local deck meetings, maybe giving out export achievement certificates or anything like that, that would actually, as John was just saying, they're up for reelection. They're looking for those PR things of handing a small business an export achievement certificate or something like that. But don't you think that DEC should be a little bit more intentional in their export advocacy, and maybe having these staff members and members visit some of their meetings or events that they're having throughout the year would be important? And I'll be quiet and let John and Rick respond to that.
Go ahead, John. I'll go after you, but yeah.
Okay, no, I just say absolutely. We've done it. They reach out. I mean, the members always come, they don't live here in Washington 52 weeks a year. They're always going back to the districts. They're mostly going back, Congress will come in on Tuesday. They try to check out on Thursday. They're back in their districts on Friday. You can check with their schedules of coming in. Monday's always a good day to get with them, or Fridays, but they're always back in their districts. I know even, which is interesting because I've flown on with some of them going back to Los Angeles from Washington on flights up there, going back for the weekend and then turn around and coming back on a red eye, Sunday night or Monday night, every week, week after week, week after week, week after, and they're going back there to meet with their constituents. They're not going back out there, to relax, to have a good time. No, that's not what they're doing. And, well, that's what there are some, but I'm not naming names, but basically the most of them, the bulk of them, that's what they're doing. And you have this opportunity, and you can schedule meetings, you can bring it. They also have, if you look at a congressionals on their calendars, you'll know the weeks that Congress is not in session. And that's when they're looking to have meetings, and you can bring them to your facilities, or your deck can host a reception or a lunch or something, or breakfast. It doesn't matter. And they'd be more than happy. That's where Rick was talking about earlier, getting with their schedulers, but they need to know. Yeah. And you, the decks you represent, you need to reach out to them and to invite them. Rick?
Well, what we do, and John, you're exactly right. We've done this in Kentucky as well, and especially, our two senators and our House members. It just depends on when we could do it. We're a long state, as you might say, from one end to the other. So it depends on where we're going to have our meeting, but we do invite them constantly. And so especially what's interesting, especially if we have some trade policy information back in the days when we actually had some that we could share. They were very, very interested in attending to learn about that. But there's other issues now, and that we can, start that again. We haven't had any for 2 years in our state. And so we're going to start that up again. And you can believe me that they will be invited, and we'll see who could come. And then for the next one, we'll see who else can attend. But
yeah, and it's easier to get the members now to see them in the district than it is here in the office. There's still restrictions here because of COVID. We're expecting to lift the mask mandate. Trust me, most of the members, they hate the mask mandate. Everybody hates the mask mandate, but we're checking. I haven't, my meetings that I've had with the staffers, they've all been off the hill. I had this wasn't really, this was a social thing that I had a senator 3 weeks ago for dinner, small dinner party at my house. And we didn't talk politics the whole night with everything going on, and he's a Republican and I'm a Democrat, and we stayed away, but both of us are former Marines, so we got along really well, and we've known each other for years. I also want to make another comment about the staffers. It's interesting, and Rick, you can comment on this as well, but you'd be surprised. You have the young staff, and then you have the senior staff. And a lot of times these senior staff, the member, whether it's a member of the House or the Senate, retires, and that staffer runs for that office, and eventually that staffer becomes that member of the House or that senator. I've seen it happen time and time again. It's really amazing. So when they come here, it's John Kasich is a prime example from Ohio. When he came here to Washington, he got out of college, he was an intern for the congressman he was working for. And he worked up through the staff. And my friend said, John was like, he was like totally lost. And eventually he came in and got more and more active in the staff. And when the congressman passed away, John ran for the office. He got elected to the office, and it's just, and now as they say, the rest is history, I became the governor of Ohio, ran for president, but those are the type of things that happen. This senator, I won't mention, be like that, the same thing. He was a staffer. He was a senior staffer, chief of staff, and ran and became a senator. But it happens. So it's good to make those connections with staff because you never know. You just never know.
No, that's right. You don't know. I agree. Jonathan, Sean?
No, I agree with you guys. And I, again, meeting these members of Congress, that's why I asked the question about being intentional about meeting with these people. I think you guys really brought up some good points about, getting to know the staffers because they may be the future legislative stakeholders and everything. But the other thing is they have their ear, especially those senior staffers really have the ear, and the congressional representative may be, a little bit reliant on that senior staffer to get that information to him or her. So, being in contact with them on a regular basis is very, very important. Sean?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to some things you said, matter of fact, Jonathan. First of all, I'll say there's nothing wrong with Boeing. It's just that it's a little less sympathetic than what you might consider in a local small business.
Yeah.
But I think that's what a lot of it comes down to, because you can go up there armed with all kinds of statistics, and that's not one of those things that's really going to resonate. I think that when you're talking to them, you want to tell them a story. And you want to tell them a story about small local enterprise. That's what they want to hear. And that's something that's going to resonate with them. And they're going to repeat that. They're going to remember that. A page full of statistics is very difficult to get excited about. But if you have a story about a constituent and how they've been successful or some of the problems they've been having and how that relates to your overall goal, whatever that might be in a trade sense, that's what you need to do. Everybody wants to hear a story.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment about Boeing. I actually did some calls on the Hill with Boeing as a debt. And the reason I did, that was on the Exim Bank when we were doing it, and to point out to the members, the money just doesn't go to, to Boeing. Boeing has 26,000 suppliers. And every time Boeing sells an aircraft, those suppliers get paid. And those suppliers are small companies. They're across the entire country. And you've got to get it's a mindset where the members are thinking, oh, it's just Boeing, they're getting everything. No, it doesn't work that way. And you have to explain to them that all these companies that are involved. And it takes somebody where we're representing, most of our members are SM, small, medium-sized enterprises. We benefit from some companies like that, whether it's General Electric or Caterpillar or anything that we're feeding parts and equipment to these companies that they're selling. We've done Exim Bank projects. I have personally been involved, major projects overseas where we were brought in from the prime on that, who was the Exim Bank recipient. Now, we would have never gotten in on that project if it wasn't for that prime. So those are the type of things you look at. But it goes back to educating the member and their staff. All you have to do is watch the news, and I'm sure you see the things that some of these members of Congress are saying. Trust me, there are some here that really are here to do a job, and there's others that are here, it's all about them. But you'll see they'll make some comment that just leaves your jaw agape. You can't even believe they just said that, but it's true. They'll do that. And so you got to get to them. You got to get to their staff. It's a process. Rick?
I just agree with you 100%. It's just a process, and we just got to keep doing it.
And John, you said it's just a matter of getting to them, and we do have a question about security as far as getting in to make visit with staffers and representatives. What can you say about that right now?
Well, it's still tight. I mean, but you can make the request. As we were talking, there are places around Capitol Hill if you want to get up here and meet. If they're agreeing to meet with you, particularly staff, there's a lot of restaurants, little places around Capitol Hill I've met, and because I used to be a member a long time ago, the Capitol Hill Club, which sits right on C Street. It's right next to the Republican National Headquarters. It's catty corner from the Cannon office building and next to the new wing of the Library of Congress. And then you have down the street, which is not right there, but it's where the Democratic headquarters. They can meet you there, but it's at their request. It's up to them. I think we're checking right now to see what's doing, if they're going to change rules, allow people to come in and go out like it used to be. I know we have the conference coming up in May, and maybe some people want to come in, and we can ask, to see what their policy is, but it's in motion right now.
Yes.
And I saw David just put a message. I didn't see what it said. Sean, what did he just write?
On the
David's noting the fact that, well, I'll read it here. Example, in the Boeing example, I always explain that Boeing does not manufacture aircraft. That usually gets their attention. Then you explain that Boeing assembles aircraft from 26,000 suppliers.
Exactly. And that was the point. I always told Boeing, when you go into a member to the Senate and they're totally against you, whatever, I'd like to bring in like a model kit of a Boeing, 777, okay, and put it in there, and then you pull it apart and it breaks into 1,000 pieces, like you have to glue it all back together again. I go, see all those pieces? Those are all the suppliers, And what Boeing does is they take all those pieces and they put it back together again. We just carry that model around in a box. They like the idea, but we thought about, God, how long would it take us to put that thing back together every day? But that's the idea. You're absolutely right.
David, I had talked about your security question. Right now at the House, at least for the office, one of our members, they have to physically come down, and you have to have an appointment. The appointment has to be downstairs, also in the building with security. The staffer will come down and get your group and sign in. You sign in on the evidently on the list, and then they'll escort you up, and they will escort you down. So that's what's going on now, as far as what I was told from one of our House members.
Yeah, and I mean yeah, he's right. I mean, I used to, as you know, Rick, you did the same thing. I just stroll in, doesn't matter. Cannon, Longworth, over to any of them. You just walk right in, but you had an appointment. You didn't need to go through this, and it was a pain for the members, especially if they're strewn all over the place, to send a staffer down, because there's other people waiting to do the same thing to come down and get you. They're not happy about it, but that's the rules.
Yeah.
I just saw, what did Suzanne Sterling? She just posted something. I didn't get it. It's not staying on the screen long enough for me to read it.
I haven't seen Suzanne's.
What we've got here, it wasn't Suzanne, it was Carmen, saying that when embassies with commercial service leading the charge advocate for Boeing, they're actually advocating for those 26,000 suppliers.
Okay.
I've been asked to take my screen down. I shall do that now, if that's all right with everybody. So there we go.
So do we have any questions for the speakers or for Sean or myself, in regards to maybe what your deck could be doing, how the NADEC can help you? What other questions or comments do we have? I'm glad I made the Boeing statement as a Boeing supplier myself. I think it's great to share that both perspective. And what I like to say to my members of Congress is, you don't like Boeing, you like me. I supply Boeing. Oh, by the way, I also sell to a bunch of other people outside the US that's not called Boeing. So you win both ways. But yeah, so it looks like we're starting to get some questions.
Yeah, no,
here.
Andy Kroll just made a good point about the committee meetings. If you don't get the staff to try it, he's absolutely right. Because he does a lot of this, but you can, when you're here, absolutely, if you can meet with the staffers from the committees. I know when I was working on going back to the time when you mentioned, Jonathan, about what I did for Yugoslavia, We had that under the miscellaneous tariff bill. And I met with the committee's staffers all the time how to push this thing through when we needed it, and extremely helpful, because you'd be surprised at how often they have other people, other resources that will take up your cause. Very important. Good point, Andy. Thank you for bringing that up.
Some of the other things that are coming up here, Ann Burkett asks, can the NADEC provide talking points on some of these topics and key trade issues? I will go ahead and answer that. Most definitely. We do have a policy committee, and Rick and John, you're probably both on the policy committee. Our intention is to provide one-pagers, two-pagers, just talking points, so that you have, let's say, a more informed view of what's going on with a lot of these as leave-behinds, that you can address some of these trade issues. Because I'll admit that at a local DEC level, sometimes if you don't have the people that do that on a regular basis, you just don't have the bandwidth to put some of that material together. And it's our intention as the NADEC to help out with that. When things come up, we will proactively supply those to the DECs. And if you have information that you might be looking for and you're hoping that the NADEC might be able to provide that, feel free to ask us. David Day is also on this webinar as an attendee, and he's a co-chair of the policy committee, and certainly you can find his information and shoot something off to him directly, and he can see if the policy committee can get working on that. And next question we've got here also, are we all going to be at the annual conference? More importantly, of the attendees, are you going to be at the May conference? Yes, the four of us, Heidi, our silent guest here, will also be there. We will be there on May 19th and 20th, but please register, and I hope to see you there as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add to the annual conference for the 19th and 20th. John Saylor will be actually leading a panel on the, well, John, you want to talk about it for a second, what the title of the panel is?
Yeah, it's on the port crisis. That's what we're going to be discussing, the port crisis, how we got there, the effect it's having on everybody, and the solutions. And I could tell you right now, working on the panelists, I do have a confirmation. We have the president and CEO of the Association of American Port Authorities, who is going to lead it off, Chris Collins. Why not? As I have, as you guys know, at least in this group, as a former state commissioner for the ports of Virginia, I have a lot of experience in dealing with the ports and the ports authorities around the country. But Chris is going to talk about, what he'll represent all the ports in the country. I also have, waiting for confirmation, I won't say it yet until I get the absolute confirmation, on one of the top ocean carriers in the world, who have operations both East Coast, West Coast, and Gulf, also will address the situation from a carrier's perspective. And once I get that on, then I'm reaching out to one of our members that they don't know who it is yet, as a shipper, to get their perspective from the shipper standpoint. So we have the ports, we have the carriers, and we have the shippers, and that will be on our first panel discussion that starts at 9:30 in the morning on the 19th.
That's correct. And then Sean's going to be doing a panel on supply chains, and to be discussing that. Sean, you want to touch on that for a second?
Yeah, we're going to touch on it from an industry standpoint, retailers, manufacturers, and agricultural producers, and the challenges that they're facing.
And the other thing is, I want to announce to everybody, in case you missed it, I don't know how, but in case you missed it, we were talking about XM. So the current newly minted president and chair of XM Bank will be a keynote speaker on the 19th, May 19th. So you definitely want to be there for that. We also have invited some congressional members and their staff to attend the event. So if you want to brush up on these skills tips and tricks, as I say, that you learned from this, it's a great opportunity to do that, even if you can't get on the Hill because of restrictions, but maybe you can make some appointments and meet people off site. Maybe you want to buddy up with somebody like Rick or John or Sean or myself and meet some congressional staffers or maybe congressional members that maybe are not in your district, but it makes you just feel a little bit better to kind of ease into that. You know, the May conference will be a good place for you to do that because we typically have some congressional members. I do believe we're close to confirming a senator and a congressman to be actually at the event. So again, great opportunities for you guys to practice this.
And I will even commit, Jonathan, if you have congressional visits scheduled for that week, I will be in town that entire week. So if you've got one scheduled and want me to tag along, please let me know and I'll see if I can join you.
Do we have any other questions or comments or anything for the group? Because I know we're coming up on time. I see Heidi's put up our next webinar. Thank you, Heidi. Actually, the next two webinars. This is great. So John, Rick, do you have anything before I let Sean close us out?
No,
I don't, other than, if, everybody's got our contact information, feel free to do it. I could say that our deck here in Virginia DC deck is working closely with the NADEC to provide that service on the Hill for meetings, and not just for the members themselves, but don't forget there's other agencies here that we're dealing with. And also we are have that fortunate ability to reach out to the embassies. We have a very good, within the entire deck, we have a lot of working relationships with a number of embassies in the Washington, D.C. area. So we work with the ambassadors, we work with their trade attaches or economic attaches. So it's always good to know if we can help you on that as well. Rick?
no, I don't have anything else on that. I appreciate everybody attending. I do want to also give a shout out to Nate Lamar, who was part of our team but could not attend today. He helped formulate some of the documentation. So we look forward to seeing everybody in May. It's going to be, I believe, very exciting because we all haven't been there in at least 2 years.
Yeah, let's just hope it doesn't raise its ugly head again, on another one. Oh my God. But yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, John, Jonathan, and Rick, and Heidi, who isn't on camera, thank you for putting this together. At the NADEC, one of our goals is to help out DEC members and DECs around the country in addressing some of these issues. We're going to do a number of webinars, as you can see here. We've got some more that are subject matter based, but we also hope to do a series of the mechanics of DECs and how to help DECs with some of those more common activities that we engage in. Of course, this one I think is probably one of the strongest ones we can provide because it is one of those areas that's most difficult for DEC members. A lot of us work at companies and we know how to promote trade. We know how to talk to other companies on how we do some of those things that we do in international business. But a lot of us just don't have that exposure or experience in dealing with representatives or government officials. So hopefully this is helpful. You've had a link in the chat for the document that Rick brought up. It's also available on our website. And don't be surprised if it doesn't appear in an inbox near you here sometime soon. That we'll send it out because we want all DEC members to get a little bit more comfortable with this process. It's the season for that, particularly as we come up on the national conference, where most of us, I'd love it to see most of us, when I say that an organization of 1,450, I'd love to see most of us showing up in May and May 19th and 20th. I'll plug it one more time. But it's a perfect opportunity to come in a day early so that you can go ahead and meet with some of your representatives. We'd like to help you with that at the NADEC as much as we can. We appreciate the fact that you're willing to do that and the interest, enthusiasm, and expertise you guys bring to the DEC mission. And we, of course, the NADEC are here to help you fulfill that. I see Rick's finger up, so he's got something else to say.
Just one more thing. I just want to repeat that Sean will probably be sending out this email that'll have 4 attachments. And one of them is the white paper that we discussed, the links for the different committees and this link. And there's one more link, I think. What was that? There's supposed to be 4 links, I believe. But anyway, maybe it's just this type of or this particular document that we have that will have that information, so you can do all of that.
So we hope we're giving you all the tools. All we need now is you guys as attendees and as deck members to participate and engage with your representatives. Thank you again for joining today. I've got 4 minutes after the hour, which means everybody's going, oh, I've got somewhere to be. And if you're on the East Coast, you're going, I should already be like driving home, or yeah, okay, outside of that home office. With that, have a great evening. Thank you for joining us today. Goodbye.